हरि ओम। ॐ सहनाववतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शांति शांति। समस्त जन कल्याणे निरतं करुणामयं नमामि चिन्मयं देवं सद्गुरुं ब्रह्मविद्वरम्। ॐ श्री चिन्मय सद्गुरवे नमः। योगेन चित्तस्य पदेन वाचां मलं शरीरस्य च वैद्यकेन योपाकरोत्तं प्रवरं मुनीनां पातञ्जलि प्राञ्जलिनानतोऽस्मि। हरि ओम। We are in the second or the sadhana path, trying to deal with the necessities of Nimnatam or the inferior adhikari of yoga. In other words, the one who is completely immersed in the world, what are the things that he is expected to do before he takes the journey onwards is what we are trying to see. In other words, what are the first and the basic, fundamental and necessary steps that one should undertake if one is sincere in the mind about becoming an yogi. Have no doubt in the mind that without these, there is no way a person can progress in this inward journey. First thing first, the only difference that we need to understand between a yogi and an ordinary person is a yogi knows how to behave in this world. An ordinary person is sucked into the world. He doesn't know how to behave in the world. We are carried away by the world. And when I say the world, I mean the outer world, the world of Indriyas, and the inner world, the world of mind. We are badly trapped in the world through the sense organs and in the internal world via the mind. To remove the suffocating obstructions of this world created by the senses, we undertake certain rules and regulations, which we call yama and niyama. They are mandatory and not optional. They are fundamental and not superficial. So one has to think seriously about yama and niyama before even thinking of starting the inward journey. Amongst the niyamas, we saw the whole purpose of yama niyama is to train the mind. A yogi has trained the mind. When Gurudev was asked by a disciple, by a sadhaka, that Gurudev, how is it that in your presence things look easy? And the answer given by him was, my mind is strong, yours is not. A strong mind is a mind which is perfectly disciplined and fully under control of the mind bearer, the owner of the mind. Ours is a mind which is completely subjugating ourselves under its own influence. We go where the mind goes. In case of a yogi, the mind goes where he goes. Who is in the driving seat is what all the difference that makes in this world. When the mind is in the driving seat, we are bound to go through the tumultuous experience of life simply because mind is not a better driver unless trained by the owner. Mind is a pliable thing, mind is a flexible thing that needs to be trained. And mind well, there is training of mind means basically untraining the bad habits that the mind has inculcated. You do not train a person to be a good driver. You train a person not to be a bad driver. You remove the impurities, the thing is pure. There's nothing called pure thing. Pure is its own existence. Impurities have crept in, you remove them. Similarly, the mind is always the best conductor of consciousness because it is subjected to the enormous wrong habits. Over a period of time, including many births, the mind is trained to perform inefficiently, wrongly, and on the top of it, the mind presumes that it is the king of all the activities, not the owner of the mind. The first step that the yogi takes through the yamas and the niyamas is to reassert his own position vis-a-vis mind, train the mind, subjugate the mind from the bad and the evil tendencies, put it under perfect control, sanyatendriyata. And in this, the yamas are followed when we interact with the world, while the niyamas are followed even if we are not interacting with the world. Of the niyamas, we saw the shauch or the purity, which again as beautifully illustrated by Krishnananda Swamiji into this absence of desire. His division of anabolic and catabolic desires. We are all filled with catabolic desires, the desires that destroy us. And the desires that save us from destruction are the anabolic desires, as he has called. Ramakrishna Paramahansa has beautifully described these two desires. You have a thorn pricking in your leg, your feet is giving you pain because there is a thorn there. This thorn is called catabolic desires. And how do you remove it? How do you get out of this pain? Is by using another thorn to remove this particular thorn. The thorn that helps in removing this thorn is called anabolic thorn. So good desires are used to whisk away the bad desires And after the bad desires are gone, what do? You throw the good desires also, because they are of no use. You throw both the thorns. After one thorn removes the another thorn, both are to be thrown away. Similarly, a purity or a shauch is absence of desire, but it starts from asserting ourselves vis-a-vis our mind and thinking about pure things, desiring pure thoughts, which are nothing else but sattvika thoughts. We've gone into the details of how shaucha, bahyantara shaucha and abhyantara shaucha, the external purity and the internal purity, has been sufficiently discussed during the last session. What we need to know today is the art of santosha. Santosha is a very important niyama. I remember during one of our sessions, especially in Samadhipada, there were questions asked about the practical utility. Patanjali Yoga Shastra is the only practical darshan amongst the Shad darshanas, rest all are philosophical. So there was a question raised that we don't see any practicality in this. That was because we were in Samadhipada, but in Sadhanapada, it's all practical nature and the practical tips and the hints. So yama niyama is the essence of practice to be followed by all those who aspire to be yogi. Amongst them, the panchaniyamas, the santosha is something which is extremely critical for an aspirant yogi. What is santosha? Santosha is a balanced state of mind in which no reaction originates. Although it is loosely translated as happiness, and generally we are trying to acquire happiness in all the activities. Ask anybody a question. Why are you doing what all you are doing? May it be purchasing an aircraft for a personal use, or may it be buying a small candy for a child. If you ask a question, why are you doing all this? The only answer he gets is, because I want to be happy. In fact, it won't be wrong if we say that the very purpose for which we do all the efforts is to become happy. Everybody chasing happiness. Unfortunately, the chase is on. It never completes. Right from childhood till we die, and again we get reborn, the happiness always eludes us. We don't get happiness, yet we are searching for happiness. It is the search which hasn't ended, and it will never end. It's because if you try walking towards west and you want to find out east, it is never possible because you're walking in the opposite direction. Similarly, if you're trying to chase happiness, you'll never get it because you do not know from where the happiness comes. The most important and the fundamental aspect about happiness is a state of mind. Happiness has nothing to do with the world. The objects around are mere objects. Happiness is not objective. Happiness is subjective. Happiness emanates within, not outside. The very expectation that the happiness should flow to me from outside is a wrong proposition. Happiness cannot flow from outside. Happiness can and should emanate from within. And what comes from within does not require any object. Anything that requires an object for happiness is not a happiness at all. And that is the reason why in this world, the ephemeral world of objects, happiness can never ever be sought, and it can never ever be permanent. So the most important aspect to keep in mind is happiness is subjective and not objective. I can be happy right here if I decide to remain happy, and I can be unhappy right now, right here, if I decide to be unhappy. The object is an excuse. I lost money is an excuse to remain unhappy. I got money is an excuse to remain happy, because the money doesn't make me happy or unhappy. It is I who make me happy or unhappy. Happiness is a subjective phenomena. It is not an objective phenomena, which is a fundamental mistake we do in acquiring happiness. So that is why on a vacation, on a holiday, we make a plan to go outside in a restaurant to eat the most favorite dish of ours, thinking that that dish will give me happiness. We create so much of effort to get that object, but after having that dish in that restaurant, the happiness that comes is not from the dish that you ate, but from within, because of the contentment feeling that you created within your mind by yourself. The art of niyama called santosha is a requirement for an aspirant yogi to remain happy always, by realizing that I can be happy, since happiness is dependent on me, not on situation. Situation is a force that asks for a response. In fact, the life is full of situations. Each situation is asking, forcing, compelling us to respond. While responding to them, we respond in a different manner, not like a yogic manner. A yogi does not let situation throw or compel a response, because his response is standard response, a response of contentment. Nothing from outside should be able to penetrate the wall that you erect, which will disturb the equilibrium of your mind. The ocean of the mind, which is still and tranquil, which is a must for an yogi, gets disturbed by the pebbles of circumstances that are thrown from outside. We let them come in, and the disturbance starts. So that is why tushti or nirlobhata, tushti or nirlobhata is the crux of santosha. Mind well, the santosha or the happiness is the second name of peace. The shanti or the peace is nothing else but happiness. We tend to bifurcate santosha from shanti. But technically speaking, you cannot have santosha if you are not at peace. And if you are at peace, what you get is santosha. What it means is, for santosha to prevail, what we need is peace of mind. A perfectly controlled, equanimous mind is a must for santosha. And for peace to prevail, response and reaction to the surroundings are to be verified very cautiously. Unfortunately, over the period of time, not only in this birth, but the earlier births, we all have trained our mind to react in a hasty fashion. We react immediately. We respond immediately. We don't think and respond. We respond and then think. That's a fundamental mistake in thinking. A yogi does not react or respond unless he observes a situation for which he takes a pause. Taking a pause before responding or reacting is a must in the practice of yoga, which itself means nothing should be done hastily or impromptu. There is nothing impromptu in yoga. Everything is thoughtful. Thinking first, reaction afterwards, not the other way around. If that is so, then why do we react and respond so fast? That's because we had developed a habit of doing so. We are addicted to the way we react or respond. How do we get out of it? By consciously practicing every time we react or respond, so that slowly we inculcate a habit of thinking, taking a pause, and then responding. There is an enormous amount of poverty around us. There is an enormous amount of cruelty around us, but it doesn't affect us. Why? We all see it. We all hear it. But it doesn't affect us because our mind is not entertaining any reaction or response to that. However, if the same thing happens to my child or myself, I react or respond because my mind takes notice of it. That means if the mind has taken a notice of something, then only it will react or respond. No response is possible, no reaction is possible if the mind has not taken cognizance of the fact. So one of the easier and better method for a yogi is he tries to restrict his responses and reaction to very few things, which in Shastra is called Parisankhya Vidhi. Reduce your interactions. They're all enemies because each interaction leads to impromptu reaction from you, leading to unhappiness and disturbance in the peace of mind. So if we reduce our interaction with the outside world and keep it to the minimum, keeping things to the minimum is the most important underlining statement of a yogi. If one wants to become a yogi, keep this in mind, that you will have to be as less involved in the world as possible. Yes, being into grahastha-ashrama, we have lots of responsibilities, but within the sphere of your activities, if you clearly observe yourself, if you keenly observe yourselves, you will realize that I have increased my interactions to a great extent unnecessarily, which is called upadvyapa. There is a vyapa and there is upadvyapa. I need to feed my children, that is vyapa. I need to wear clothes, that is vyapa. but I want 100 shirts, each time changing with the fashion. That is upadvyapa. I need to eat food for my sustenance. It is vyapa. But I want to eat a special dish. It is upadvyapa. Mind well, all upadvyapa has to be completely curtailed if you want to be a yogi. An ordinary person is immersed in the world. Yogi only puts his feet in the world and gets weight to the required level. We are now a part of the world, willy-nilly, whether you wanted it or not. You are a part of the world, so you shall interact in this world, but keep and restrict the interaction to the minimum. That helps in santosha. That helps in not disturbing the inner calm. Unfortunately, so much we are addicted to interacting with this world that most of the old people, if you look at them, you will realize that they constantly want to be the part of the world. Actually, an old person should be a very happy person because he's given food, he's given everything on the platter, he's not expected to work, he has all the time in the world to devote to the God. But he never does that. In fact, all the old people are quite a pain. That is because they constantly want to come into the mainstream of activities, even though their body is not allowing, even though their mind is not allowing. पाछे दिन पाछे गए किए न हरि से हेत अब पछताए क्या कीजे जब चिड़िया चुग गई खेत. All along, for the period of almost 70-80 years, if you have behaved in a wrong manner, and then you expect at the age of 75 or 80, you want to devote yourself to the God, sir, it will never happen. It is impossible to inculcate love for the Lord if you have not done it in your younger days. That is why the art and the practice of santosha, as enunciated by Patanjali Maharaj, is you have to be contented inside. The disturbances that are happening outside are to be seen in the most neutral manner as far as possible. It is extremely difficult to be neutral when something happens to the child or the wife or the sister or the mother. But you need to understand that santosha is a dynamic activity, not laziness. Not doing a thing is not santosha. Doing a thing properly is santosha. Attend to your mother, attend to your child, attend to your wife also, attend to your duties, but keep the flame burning inside the mind that this is all outside world. Don't take the world so close to your bosom. It will burn you. ये दुनिया कागज की पुड़िया, बूंद पड़े घुल जाना है, रहना नहीं देश बिराना है. Kabir Maharaj says, don't in whatever minimum interaction.
I think the audio is mute.
Your closest friend may ditch you.
There is some bandwidth problem, I think. I can see very low band.
Is it clear now? Hello?
Yeah, yes.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes.
Yes, yes.
So So what is important for the santosha to execute is reduce the interaction with the world to the minimum, and when a disturbance of a very unpleasant type happens, train your mind to look at the incidents as a result of your prarabdha and don't get carried by it. A severe insult heaped upon us can also be seen as the result of the insult that I heaped on somebody in my previous birth. When one has not done anything to cause something, then it is always because of the prarabdha. You behaved nicely, yet you received a slap from somebody. It defies the logic. But it is not the question of logic. In spite of your good behavior, you have been subjected to the torture simply because of your prarabdha. And the converse is also true. In spite of all the bad behaviors, you are heaped with a lot of wealth. Look at all the politicians, all the crooked people in the world. And everyone is surprised to know that he is such a crook of highest order, yet he is having a lot of money and the power. So what money and power he is enjoying is because of prarabdha. What crookedness he is doing is he is digging his own grave for the next birth. So any untoward incidents happening, something unpleasant happening to us, the flame should constantly be burning in the mind that I'm suffering because of my prarabdha or I'm enjoying because of my prarabdha. Prarabdha will come and go. I don't intend to create another prarabdha through karma. So that is why santosha is a positive, dynamic attempt by a yogi who is always alert to keep himself in a state of equilibrium at all the times. Santosha brings equilibrium of mind, and agitated mind is an unsuitable mind for meditation. The mind which fluctuates at a drop of hat is a completely unsuitable mind for meditation. One cannot even imagine or think of meditation if the mind is wavering. Can a whirlpool think of steadiness of water? It cannot. A constantly disturbed water can never be calm. Meditation is a progress, or meditation is a journey that is undertaken by a still mind. A disturbed mind, a mind that is not at equilibrium, can never even imagine meditation. So santosha is an attempt, for that matter, the entire Yamaniyamas is an attempt to prepare the mind for the inward journey. No inward journey is possible, sir, if the outward interactions of the mind are not in perfect control of the yogi. If santosha is practiced, then vikshepa of the mind is under control. What is vikshepa? Vikshepa is the tendency of the mind to go outward. Tendency of the mind means a mind which is habituated to go outside through the senses is called vikshepa. By practicing santosha, we are slowly controlling the mind so the vikshepa comes down. Now imagine a perfectly controlled mind now trying to undertake the inner journey. We are trying to sit for meditation. And suddenly the mind thinks of the outside world. What happened? The mind projected itself in the outer world. This is called vikshepa. You're astride a horse, you are sitting on a horse, trying to walk in easterly, trying to take the horse in the easterly direction. And suddenly the horse remembered that he is supposed to go west. What will happen? We will never reach on the easterly side. The mind remembers old associations. So it will always try to project into the smoother territories which it has experienced earlier. And if that happens, mind cannot take a new journey. Mind well, samadhi and all other aspects of meditation are the new journeys for an untrained mind. So in order to smoothen that journey on the inward journey, we need to undertake the practice of santosha. Disturbances are of two types. The external obvious disturbances. The child has failed in the exam. It's a cause of distress. We react to that. This is outer disturbance. But there are so many inner disturbances we have inside our mind, which we do not know. Apparently, we are very calm from outside. The surface looks very calm, but inside we are disturbed to a great extent. This is called stress. Stress is a disturbance which is not seen from outside, but is definitely working inside. So much we are used to the stress that we do not realize that we are under stress. That is unfortunately the ugly beauty of the truth called stress. The essence or the arc of thinking of outside disturbances seeps inside the mind in the form of stress. And you cannot de-stress yourself unless you learn or relearn how to tackle the outer disturbances without disturbing the inner poise of the mind. So the practice of santosha is nothing else but a practice of de-stressing oneself, built on the foundation of equanimity and containment. There are two aspects in santosha. One is called preventive aspect, another is called curative aspect. The preventive aspect is the most important and the better side of it, while the curative aspect is also something to be practiced in the initial stages. The preventive aspect is the one who is able to think before acting. Only he can exercise the preventive aspect. If there is a disturbance that is happening outside, and if you're alert about it, then you can see how the disturbance is coming closer to you to disturb your mind and stop it there itself. For that, you require alertness, which is called dakshata. So you have to be alert and vigilant. Alert and vigilant is savadha and daksha. Samartha Ramadas says, savadha ani daksha taya tatkalachi moksha. You can attain salvation provided you have the alertness and the vigilant mind. So this is precisely the preventive aspect. The curative aspect. The curative aspect is a post-mortem aspect. Sometimes the things do happen in the world, they disturb our happiness. The santosha gets disturbed, we become unhappy. But even how much unhappy you will become, there is a limit on it. There are people who keep crying about something that has happened for days and months to come. There are people who cry about a son that died in the childhood, even for the next 20 years. Remembering the goodness of somebody is a different thing, and brooding about what has happened is a different thing. Gurudeva passed long back, but we don't lament Gurudeva's passing by because we feel his presence today, because we look at the excellent and the bright aspects of Gurudeva all the time. Then when it comes to our own child, which has passed away in the childhood, why do we become so melancholic? Why don't we look at the brighter aspect of the child? That is because of our faulty way of thinking. The curative aspect is, after a disturbing thing has happened, after the equilibrium of the mind is disturbed, controlling the damage, restricting the time of lamentation is also an aspect of inculcating habit of santosha. As they rightly say, a wave is allowed, but a deluge is not acceptable in yoga. Somebody passes away, you cannot laugh at it, smile at it. Certainly not. There will be an element of little bit of sadness, but that is like a wave on the ocean. It comes and disappears, but it should not become a deluge. You get swept away by that. Jnaneshwar Maharaj Mauli says, Sukhe santosha na yave, dukhe vishada na bhajave. Don't keep on brooding about bad things that have happened. And it's our own habit. Whenever we meet together, we start talking about how I lost something. And you get all the words in the world to describe how much you was pained or how much you were pained because of it. It's all a waste of time. So, sannihita sadhanat, that which is required as the basic necessity, anupaditsa. What is anupaditsa? Upadatum ichhayaha abhavaha. Having no desire for excess is a very important aspect in santosha. If you know very well that objects are the causes of suffering, why increase the objects? Happiness is a subjective phenomena. Happiness does not depend on the objects. Then why collect them? That is why whatever has been given to you within your means, because of your prarabdha. If you're a beggar, you cannot have a house. Don't lament about it. You're a beggar because of prarabdha. So sannihita sadhanat, whatever has been given to you as a necessity by the prarabdha, be contented in it and do not desire excess. Anupaditsa, which itself means yadrucha labha santushtam. Yadrucha labham, whatever you have, be contented in it. The biggest problem is we are not content in whatever we have is simply because of our inbuilt habit of comparison. My Ferrari gives me happiness till the time my neighbor doesn't have a better model of Ferrari than that. My phone does not give me happiness till the time another person comes out with a better model of the same phone. All writing instruments write, but a Mont Blanc gives me a little additional happiness because I feel he doesn't have, I have it. Sir, the Mont Blanc doesn't give you the happiness. The happiness is a state of mind. The objects shall not give you happiness. Had it been so that the objects are giving the happiness, then the object should give you happiness forever. It doesn't happen that way. Anything that you buy and purchase, may it be a clothing material or an electronic instrument, it stops giving you happiness after even a day of having it. A new car gives you happiness, but it's only for a few days and it becomes a routine. A new shirt gives you happiness, but for a few days. And if I may say so, a new wife also makes you feel that you are lucky to have a very beautiful wife, but in few months, the colors fade. यह संसार फूल सेवन को सुंदर देखी लुभायो, चाखन लाग्यो रुई उड़ गई, हाथ कछु नहीं आयो, रे मन Murakha janma gavayo. Kabir Maharaj says, you've lost your life because you kept on licking a paper flower thinking that it is beautiful. Only when you came to know that it is not giving neither the taste nor the color, you started crying. That is how you wasted your life. Because the art of santosha is in yadrucha labh. So this needs to be remembered, that santosha as a part of yogi's niyama is a must before he moves forward. In other words, he cannot move forward if santosha and other niyamas are not inculcated in him. The mind which is not in equilibrium, the mind which is not in santosha, cannot think of inward journey. For sure, this is what Patanjali Maharaj tells us. After santosha, almost analogous to that but different, comes tapa. Tapasya or the tapa. We have got erroneous impression of tapa. Moment we think of tapasya, we think of jungles. We think of a bearded sannyasi walking into the jungles, abdicating everything that he has. That is not what tapam is. Although loosely translated as heat or the fire, tapam is a deliberate attempt to practice equanimity in any prevailing situation. Now, what is the prevailing situation that you and me have? We are all well-placed people, well-salaried people. We have all the amenities around us. What kind of tapam can you practice in this? Very little, sir. Because you do not have any issue with 2 square meals of the day. If you're hungry, you know you can just call for the food and eat it. This will not make you train for tapam. Tapam requires adversities. That is why it is called dvandva sahanam. Tapam is called dvandva sahanam. And dvandva sahanam, mind well, excess of anything also is a poison. As a doctor, when I was dealing with a patient, he was suffering from what is called hysteria, simply because he was basically a poor tea maker, having his tea stall at a bus stand. And suddenly the bus stand was enlarged because the 2 bus stands were merged into one and his customers increased, because of which he started getting a lot of good business. So big his business became that he got a lot of money, and the result was he suffered from hysteria, which is called harshavayu. Even the happiness also cannot be digested if it is more than what you need. Because happiness, or so-called happiness, is also a mind's condition. So excess of that also cannot be handled by the mind. So absolute paucity and excessive presence, both are dvandvas. And that is why dvandva comes from the appetite and the thirst. The one who doesn't have appetite and the thirst or the desire will not suffer from the dvandva. Jagdhum ichcha iti jigatsa. Jigatsa means bhook, appetite. Patum ichcha iti pipasa, thirst. The tapasya or the dvandva sahanam is only possible when the adverse situation comes. And since the adverse situation does not come every now and then and can come at any point of time, and if at that point of time, if we get disturbed, let us take an example. We all feel nice about how Gurudeva went from here to Himalayas and went to Uttarkashi and studied there, and he became Gurudeva. Wah, wah, wah. Everybody feels happy about it. No one thinks about every moment that he spent there without food. Nobody thinks about how a 24-hour-long day would have gone without any entertainment. How all the day there was only tapasya and only thinking and only scriptural reading and only meditating. How in the cold weather in the morning at 4:30, Tapovan Maharaj and Chinmayananda Maharaj were taking bath in the cold water. How painful it must have been. How painful it must be for a young graduate, brilliant person with a great career, suffering from not having a proper clothing. Nothing comes to our mind, even in imagination. We haven't gone through those processes. And yet we think, I can have Dvandva Sahanam and Tapasya. So since we do not have such situation, we will have to create a situation. And creating a situation is a must for Tapasya. And what do you mean by creating a situation? You may be having abundant food in your house. Create a situation of no food. Do fasting. What is fasting? Fasting is nothing but a deliberate attempt to remain hungry, to test whether you are able to remain as calm as possible even with hunger. Stupid are those who eat almost double than the normal during the fasting day, saying that this food is allowed and that food is allowed. That is not a fast at all. Under the garb of fast, under the garb of false devotion to the Lord, they are cheating themselves. If there is no pain involved, tapam cannot be achieved. A student has to appear for the test and the exam to know how well he is prepared. It cannot be done during an ordinary school day. An examination is basically nothing else but a test of his study. So we have to create the tests for our Dvandva Sahanam or Tapasya, and creating such tests is undertaking a vrata. So vrata, Vaikalya, is a deliberate attempt to inculcate tapasya. Now it depends on what level we are. If our level of tapasya is very high, then we go for very difficult vratas. But let us be very practical. We are very, very dull-witted people, absolutely inferior adhikari. So we will have to first start with the simple vratas. What is a simple vrata? Ask yourself how many clothings you have. Take a vow that I shall not buy any clothes for coming 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, 10 years. What will happen because of that? The mind's constant endeavor to acquire new clothing and fashion clothing will go down. It is not an adverse situation, but it is an adversity for you and me because we are subjected to buying things every now and then. Do vratam in your ahara. If you look at Shivananda Maharaj's diary, he always mentions, give up what you like, first for a week, then for a month, then for a year, and then forever. You're very fond of sweets, give it up for a day, then for a week. Just think of having a food without salt. It is not something which we like. But tell your mind, I have decided to eat without salt. That will increase the resolve of the mind. It is a dvandva, and you are doing sahanam. So you are developing the power of the mind. These are very inferior and low experiments. I can give you example of Mahatma Gandhi. When Kasturba Gandhi was not well in South Africa, the Bapu used to bring food from home. When he gave his food to Kasturba, the food had no salt. So Kasturba said, it is not tasty, it doesn't have a salt. And Bapu said, look, salt is something external, it is not part of human diet. But you should stay without salt because right now you are not well. And Kasturba said, what do you lose in telling me? Because you are not sick, I am sick. I am not having the taste of the food and you are telling me not to have salt. Have you ever tried without having salt? And believe me, promptly thereafter, Bapu left salt forever. One fine day, Bapu realized that what is the point in me seeing my face in the mirror, because it gives me a false impression of how I look and it creates ego. Since that time till his death, Bapu never saw his face in the mirror. These are called vratas. Keep your vratas. Inculcate new vratas so that Dvandva Sahanam can happen. And that is why Shitoshnata, cold and hot. There are people who start shivering moment it is little cold. There are people who start immediately searching and scrambling for the AC or the fan when they are feeling hot. Sir, you are pampering your body. There is something called Kaya Tapa. The physical endurance has to be done. If you're having some common cold, try to see if you can really bear it. Don't try to run helter-skelter to the doctor every drop of the hat. Don't pamper your body. And stop that stupid pampering over the skin. There are people who try to paint their skin. There are people who try to use tons of perfumes. There are people who try to do something for the hair. There are people who try to do something for the ear. There are people who try to do some tattoo on the body. Those are complete no for a yogi. If you are doing all that, it is better you don't come into the line of what is called as Yoga Shastra. Because Yoga Shastra, Patanjali Yoga Shastra is all about control of the mind. So that is why one has to undertake different types of vratas. If you become expert in taking vratas and you start hardening your mind, then you can take special vratas. There is something called Mauna Vrata. Bapu used to keep 1 day of Mauna every week. Even the best of the best and the top person coming to him, he doesn't used to speak. You can have Akara Maunam or Kashta Maunam. Akara Maunam is, Bapu used to use Akara Maunam. Orally, he never used to speak, but he used to write. That is called Akara Maunam. And there is something called Kashta Maunam. Kashta Maunam is you don't even use sign language. You do not communicate at all with anybody for a particular period. It is called Mauna Vratam. This develops the willpower, control of the mind. But one should remember, doing some absurd thing, which is called as asuric practice, is not the control of mind or tapasya. There are people who raise their hand for 10 years. That is not tapasya. It yields nothing. There are special vratas for those who have developed themselves into a higher category. There is something called Krucha Vrata. Krucha Vrata is, for first 3 days, you eat 26 bites of small. One bite is the bite that you take only 26 bites. Next 3 days, you may eat 32 bites. Next 3 days, you make 24 bites. Next 3 days, you fast. So you keep on increasing your food, then fast, decrease your food, increase. What you're doing is you're trying to train your body and mind to withstand what is not given to it. There is also something called Chandrayana Vrata. In Chandrayana Vrata, in Shukla Paksha Pratipada, start with 1 bite. So from the after the full moon day, you start first day 1 bite, second day 2 bites, third day 3 bites, fourth day 4 bites, like that 15 bites. Then at Amavasya, you have again start reducing from 15 to 14, 13, 12, 11, 10. And there are people who do it throughout their life. So in Chandrayana Vrata, no food on full moon day, Purnima, and no food on no moon day, Amavasya. Rest all increase by 1 bite, decrease by 1 bite. Go maximum up to 15 bites. There is a very difficult vrata called Santapana Vrata. In Santapana Vrata, 8 masas of Gomutra, 16 masas of Gobar, 12 masas of milk Gorasa, 10 masas of Godhruta, and 23 masas of Kushajala. They are all mixed together and taken only once. Then fast for next day. Again take this. So there are different types of vratas, all meant for basically strengthening your mind. Mind well, only a strong mind can succeed in the path of yoga. A weakling has no place at all. And there are no excuses for that. Howsoever keen you may be in yoga, you have to have strong willpower, strong mind. Stronger the mind, stronger the willpower, earlier is the control of the mind, and such a controlled Sanyatendriya mind then only can think of controlling the vikshepa. Tendency is different than the practical thing. So what is basically done is tendency or the vikshepa is to be controlled. Vikshepa is to convert the land into a barren land. All these niyamas are cutting the undue crop. But Vikshepa Rahitya is to convert the fertile land into barren land. We have to convert the mind into barren land, the mind that has no desires. So first thing you do is the crops that has come, we have to cut it first. So all these niyamas are to remove the crop. And once we stop growing it, slowly the land turns into a barren land. So the whole process is from fertile mind, we have to make barren mind. Such a barren mind then is able to next go into the other aspect of crop, which is the inward journey. So niyama is nothing else but the preparation to go to the next one, to the next level. So in the niyamas, we have seen in the last session, Saucha, the purification. We saw today the Santosha and the Tapa, that leaves us with Swadhyaya and Ishwar Pranidhana, which we shall see in the next session. Hari Om. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnam Udachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om.
We'll wait for some questions.
Hari Om, Sanjay ji. The constant, one of the things that a lot of even this, modern spiritual stalwarts of even our country, etc., have often said that as Indians, sometimes we tend to get a little passive. And we need to bring in that, while the West needs to relax, the East needs to sometimes, extend itself. And so there is this very fine line between, let's say, saying something like accepting what Prarabdha gave us vis-a-vis being fatalistic. In saying, okay, this is all that I can do, and this is, we are the way we are. And so how does one figure out what is the difference?
Yes.
Between the two. At what stage you accept, what stage, because while you live, you have to do your duties and you should strive. If it doesn't happen, then perhaps you can say, okay, I did my best, but, it's not there. How does one balance this? Is my question.
The stamp that we have been put on us as Indians or Eastern people as fatalistic people who believe that everything is by luck, by destiny. So there is always a fight. This has been a very old debate between destined fatalism versus yatna or prayatna. Mind well, it is our own saints who have said that yatna to deva janava. They have even given effort is nothing else but God. That is what they say. What it means is doing effort to the 100% extent is a must for everyone. Then where is the role of destiny? The role of destiny is in the situation that you will work in. I am a doctor. Why didn't I become engineer? This is where the destiny has a role to play. But because I am a doctor, I shall not do my medical practice ethically and properly. It has nothing to do with the destiny. It is an interplay between the tendencies that have been inculcated in your mind over a period of time by virtue of habit and practice, not only in one but many janmas, that you shall have some propensities. Your propensity is your destiny. But to change the propensity, the element of effort has been left open to you. You have come to listen to Patanjali Yoga Sutra. It is your destiny to listen to philosophical aspects. But after listening, to go home and do exactly opposite or exactly behave the way it has been told by Patanjali Maharaj is your effort, sir. Karma phala is a result of the karmashaya. But when karma phala is getting executed, reacting and responding to karma phala is your prayatna. I did a punya karma. Naturally, I am going to get some money or some advantage, some benefit in this particular time or the birth through a particular incidence. Let us take an example. I got suddenly a good amount of returns on my investment in the equity shares, while this other person did not get it. Now, why did I get it? Is because I thought I will put it in this, I'll put everybody's thinking in the same manner, then few are succeeding. The reason is you are destined to get that much amount of Lakshmi on account of the act that was done. As a result of that act, you are getting this. Up to this point, the line of fatalism or daiva or prarabdha is over because the karma phala has come to you. Now that karma phala that has come to you, you take it with a neutral mind. No new karma has been formed. But now that the money has come, you think that I am the one who is intelligent. I am the only one who knows about how to trade in equity. I will take this money and use it for that purpose. What is happening is you are creating new karma, which is out of your own efforts. This is the area of effort. The apple that fell from the tree in front of Newton was by destiny. Why did the apple fail? Was an attempt by him to analyze which is his prayatnam that resulted into the Newton's law. So Newton's law and its discovery by him was not a destiny, was an effort. But falling of an apple only in front of him, and that is the time triggering his thinking process, was a part of his destiny. So I understand there is a very thin line, and that is the reason why we always tend to take the first half too much, so we become fatalist, and that is how all Indians are. Ask anybody a question, will you take a vaccine? It is God who will prevent me. No, the presence of corona as an adhidaivik catastrophe is something which is not in your and my hand. We are subjected to that because of our prarabdha. But whether to take preventive measures against it or not is your own action in the given set of circumstances. So circumstances is a fence that is created by the destiny for you. What you do in that circumstantial fence is entirely your prayatna. So that is precisely what is called as swechha or prayatna. And in fact, so high is the value of prayatnam in Indian philosophy as well as Shastra, that one who does this prayatna is called yati. Yati means yogi. A constantly endeavoring person is called yati. And Vivekananda is known as Yatiraj, the man who struggled all his life. Gurudeva was an apostle, or he was a burning example of effort. He thought, yes, situation, what about his destiny? Destiny pushed him from Kerala to Lucknow. Destiny pushed him from Lucknow to Delhi. Destiny pushed him from getting the ashes of his own friend, Mr. Saraf. Destiny pushed him for probing into Shivananda Maharaj. Destiny pushed him from Shivananda. Destiny pushed him, but it was not only the push. At every point of time, his thinking and effort was on. Then when he decided that this is the right line of thinking, he decided to give complete effort. So how much amount of arduous exercises he did, sadhana he did. Sadhana itself is prayatna. Getting to have a right circumstances for that is destiny. You want to study very hard, you want to become Nobel laureate, but you are born in a beggar's home. Getting born in a beggar's home, destiny. Yet you reach to the Nobel laureate stage, effort. So karma phala, up to karma phala from previous karmashaya is destiny. Subsequent to that particular karma phala, how you react to that karma phala, it is effort. Yes, the effort, of course, depends upon the kind of guna you have, propensities that you have developed. That is why you may think that I want to study Patanjali Yoga Shastra, but you may not be having sufficient intellectual power to assimilate it. Why? Because the intellectual power comes because of Sattva Guna. You lack in Sattva Guna, maybe this time only effort, you go attend the satsang, come back. Next birth, Sattva Guna will increase. This time you will understand Yoga Sutra. To Asampradnat Samadhi. Another birth, you go further. You start where you end. You can either go down or you can go up. Hari Om.
Hari Om.
Hari Om, Rajendran here, sir. For a sadhaka who has entered into the spirituality very long ago, and one by one his vices are wiped out by all his efforts. And at the age of, say, at my age, if he falls sick, like diabetes and things like that, then his effort for further tapa is blocked. You cannot go further, because every 3 hours you have to eat some food, you have to take your blood sugar. So most of the time you have to think about your physical things. So for such sadhaka, what do you think, how to proceed further?
Yes, any disease or affliction that we have is a part of our prarabdha only. And when prarabdha has given the diabetes, we have to accept it. Just now we read about Santosha. My prarabdha has given me a disease where I can't breathe properly. So I cannot do pranayama properly. So within the given limitations, I shall still continue to practice whatever I can. If diabetes is there and it requires every 3-hour food and testing and whatever, etc., I shall follow it for the reason because Shariram Adyam Khalu Dharma Sadhanam. So as a part of conduit for, I have to practice the medical advices have to be followed. I want to see clearly, but I've got cataract. Right now I am using the spectacles because I can't see properly. So I will use the spectacles. These limitations have come to me because of my prarabdha. My vision became weak. This is all prarabdha. I accept it. And within the given circumstances, in fact, if you are afflicted with the diseases, if you look at the Narad Pancharatra Grantha, in it is said that if you are afflicted with the disease, Apamanam, Viroda Bandhu Vissaha, if your brother had cheated you or defrauded you, Bhagavan says, consider that as my Ashirvad. Why? Because now you are put into adversity. Adversity tests the tapam. So diabetes, Swami Vivekananda suffered from 39 years, 5 months and 23 days. He did work that cannot be done for 1,000 years. Our own Gurudeva, suffered from how many diseases? Cardiovascular disease, operation, coronary bypass, whatnot. But what about Santosha? Always smiling. In the given circumstances, so many times he was advised not to take the Yajneshala. What did he say? I'm going to take Yajneshala. What does that mean? The suffering was there, but it was kept aside. And the work continued, the karma continued. That is why, whatever may be the affliction, why diabetes? You may have breathlessness. You may suffer from corona. These are all prarabdha. That will happen. How much is my life? Jati, ayu, bhoga, karma, vipak. My life, my species, and my bhog depends on prarabdha. I'm not having good food. That's my prarabdha. Why should it affect my santosha? Whatever is there, yadrucha santosham. That is what santosha is all about. So irrespective of disease, affliction, whatever it is, accept it in stride. When I was very young, I was losing hairs on my head. I felt very bad because I thought I'm looking ugly. And I suffered unnecessarily because of that. Over a period of time, I realized that it has nothing to do with my inner beauty. How do I look is a perception in the mind, for myself as well as for others. The beauty lies in the eyes of Buddha. Once we realize that, the adversity becomes a bye-bye thing, a gone-by thing. Some of the people have certain diseases which prevents them from walking properly. Sit and take Harinam. What are we going to do when we are going to get old and we cannot get up and we are lying down in the bed? We cannot even move. I have a relation who is suffering from deep vein thrombosis. For last 30 years, he is in the bed. He cannot walk because he has got thrombotic condition. And he keeps cribbing. Life is a complete waste. I'm just lying down. I'm just lying down. I have got a lot of time in the world, but I can't do anything. You want time to do Harinam because you're very busy. When Lord gives you time, you don't because you want to move around. Jaishi sthiti ahe, taisha pari rahe, kautuk tup ahe, sanchita. Tukaram Maharaj says, wherever you are, howsoever you are, keep there and keep looking at your prarabdha smilingly. Hari Om.
Hari Om. Hari Om. Thank you.